I didn't pause. Hello. Hello, everyone. We're back. It's been a month, right? Or almost. We'll talk about why it wasn't quite a month in a bit. But welcome to everyone online. We're all back. We're live. Hopefully, everything's going to be good. There's been a lot of change. We'll talk about that in a second. And obviously, I look like I'm in a different place because I am in a different place. So, yeah, sorry about that. It's going to look a little weird for a while. However, the good news is we're back online. We're going to talk about that program again. Capture One for the next hour. You guys have been sending in your images, so your raw images to be able to edit with some challenges in some cases, with some questions. We're going to cover as many of them as we can in this session. We're also going to cover some other bits. There's some admin stuff. There's some births, deaths, and marriages announcements, all that lot. But hopefully, we're all good to go. So if there are any issues during this live, let me know, just in case. There shouldn't be, but actually before any issues, please please try restarting your browser or maybe loading into Chrome or something like that, because sometimes we get a little bit pushed away onto a different track because it's actually at your end rather than here. But hopefully, all good. So let's get what's going on. Where are we? Right, Roger. A perfect example, Roger. Look, echo, echo, echo. Never mind, I had two windows open. So yes, please check at your end before, because we're a little bit paranoid today because we haven't broadcast from here yet. It's weird. We're not worried about broadcasting randomly from hotels in the middle of the desert, but we are a little bit worried about trying new locations. So let's get going. Let's talk about, first of all, the update. So there's a version change of Capture One. The version we'll be using today is 16.7.2. If you are on a subscription, you should have had a notification this week to update your Capture One. If you're on a perpetual license, as long as you bought into 16.7, which is the latest major release, then you're fine. If you bought into anything earlier than that, you're going to have to look at upgrade options, which will be in your account on CaptureOne.com. Nothing to do with me. I don't work for Capture One, which is a beautiful place to be because I can be critical, the same as you guys can, as well as complimentary. But there is something that is quite key, which is 16.7.2 delivers a load of new features. I'm going to cover those in a minute. In terms of other stuff, so number one, how do you get files into here? You do it that way. You go to paulreeferlive.wetransfer.com. You will find a link to be able to upload your EIP or your, if you don't have an EIP, which is the Capture One version of an edited image, your raw file with any notes. Please include your name. A couple of you this time didn't include your name, so we haven't included your images. Very simple, because we don't know how to refer to you. That's all. So please upload away, put in your raw files. We'll do another session next week, and we're going to hopefully get back on track to be a bit more regular. In between these sessions, you've got access to that Facebook group. So facebook.com, and then go to the groups and then search for that one. You'll find in there, funnily enough, a monthly competition. Yes. Straight in. Runners up for this last month, actually, November. The topic this month was wind. Interestingly, I like the top left picture. Well done, David. These are our runners up. Very, very good. Love them, actually. I really like the top right, which is Ian's. But these are great examples of wind photos, some more literal than others. But here's an interesting one. So A, well done to those people. Very nice pictures. But B, more well done to our winner, which is Carlo, which is this one, which is interesting. I thought it was a blur when it started, or when I loaded it up on the screen. It's not a blur. It's actually where the branches have been scraping against a rusty door. But if ever there was evidence of wind, I quite like that. Less literal than the other ones. So well done, Carlo. You get your Growfee. Isn't that great? We're not actually going to send you that, unfortunately. They're too heavy in the post. But in reality, you get bragging rights. Yay, for the next month until we do the next competition. And the next competition will be in that Facebook group. So if you want to know and enter and get your picture up on here, yay, well done. Then go onto that Facebook group, get uploading. There we go. You'll see the new competition announced, or topic announced after this session. So, Capture One 17.2. We are going to go into that after a few other little announcements, fun ones. So, number one, there will be a slight delay on these live sessions, just as a reminder for everyone. The reason is it's something called latency, and it means that when you're typing into a comments box, it feels like it's immediate, but actually you're typing about 5 seconds in my past. I'm actually ahead of you by 5 seconds. There's a slight delay in broadcast, which means I'm not ignoring you if you put a comment in, but please do make the session interactive. Chip away, heckle, question, challenge, discuss amongst yourselves or with me. Use that comment box to do it. If you're not watching live, obviously you can't do that, but you can still put it in the comments box. It'll just be a bit later. But for those of you that are live, what's going on with my voice today? Anyway, those of you that are live, please use the chat box, and you can interact. Isn't that cool? The internet. Who'd have thought? So, a few things. Number one, don't forget. Before I get into that, Ian, is there a picture of a Growthy on David Grove's desk at work? No, but I may be sourcing a 3D printer. Anyway, we'll leave that there. So, Affinity. It was announced recently, but I just want to bring everyone's attention to it. So, Canva, the online design software company or cloud software company, bought Affinity. Affinity, I think, previously was Serif and whatever else. They have decided to make the entire application free. The only bit that's not free is if you want to do some AI stuff, some generative AI stuff that links into Canva Pro, in which case you've got to have a Canva subscription. But it does mean that you now have access there to an entirely free pixel editor. And we talk about pixel editors a lot. What we mean is basically Photoshop. Let's call it what it is. But there are other options available. And Affinity is a very, very powerful one. In fact, I know some people, like Felix, who does a lot of the miniature work, who use Affinity purely, don't even touch any Adobe product pretty much anymore. And it's stunning. Some of the output that he creates from it is stunning. So if ever there was an opportunity, if you wanted to look at something new or get into pixel editing or maybe look at different options to Photoshop or whatever, get on that bandwagon, as it were. The reason, by the way, before anyone starts talking about, why isn't Capture One free? Affinity is a product within a portfolio of a company that makes a lot of money. If it's one of many products, you can afford to make money in product A and give away product B. Capture One makes money in product A and has product A. So there is a very big difference in those business models. One of them is a freemium service. The other one is a commercial piece of software. I don't believe you're going to find a situation where Capture One is free. However, I would also look at some of the stuff we're going to look at today and say, actually, the amount of value that's been added in this year, including to landscape and cityscape photographers, is increasing pretty quick. So that's Affinity. Great. Second, Dubai. So those of you that tuned in over the last week and a half or so, well done. How good to see you. Isn't that nice? You all interacted as much as you could, which is great. David and I, so David from Capture One and I, basically went ripping around Dubai with Annabelle, who was there to help and produce, taking landscape, cityscapes, portraits of trees, all that stuff that doesn't have a heartbeat. Let's go with that. All over the place, including light trails, including rooftops, including underneath places and whatever else. There are 3 big live streams that we did from Dubai. I would encourage you, if you are into landscape and cityscape photography, to tune in on them. They're on the Capture One YouTube channel still now, and they will be presumably forever, or as long as YouTube lasts. But they cover slightly different topics each time. One of them goes all the way from golden hour through to blue hour. One of them talks about access. One of them talks about panoramic stitching. So please, if you have the time, I would have a look at them, because they can be quite handy, especially if you're planning on going to a city, just turning up and clicking, because it's not quite that simple. So those are all available for you. They're on Capture One's channel. Don't click on it now. Stay here. Have a look at it later. I'll put a link down below afterwards. Right, but speaking of which, serious moment, boys and girls, before we get into Capture One. And when we do, there's going to be lots of new toys to show you, which is fantastic. But on a serious note, Dubai. So live broadcasting, and this is it's one of those little Jerry's moments. live broadcasting's tough, okay? Two things that happen. Number one, we have to control lots of things going on at the same time. Number two, there is no room for mistakes. It is us on a screen. There is no hiding. There is no there's no protection, let's call it that way, from the outside world or from those people viewing. As most of you know, so a lot of you hopefully that you all know me in terms of personality, I have a ridiculously thick skin. I don't care, actually, what most people think. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care what people think about my opinion. I'm happy to share my opinion. I'm also happy to receive others' opinions. You can throw bricks at me. It won't hurt. However, there are people out there who are trying their best, and they're broadcasting, and they're sharing their knowledge, and they're doing it for free, and they're giving up their time, they're giving up their expertise, and they're genuinely trying to do what they can to help others. And online, that community is usually supportive. But this time, in this set of live streams, something weird happened. And funnily enough, I've been talking to David actually about it separately. I don't care about it for me, but it's indicative of something that I think is quite sick. And interestingly, there are individuals that I know of who used to broadcast and used to be online, who are now no longer online because they, to quote, can't put up with the excrement, let's call it that. So, remember that phrase, in a world where you can be anything? It was trite, right? It was overused. So, when we do the live broadcast, what we do is we ask people for feedback. And we ask them at the end of the broadcast to give a rating to those broadcasts in Capture One. So the Capture One big marker software that does it. And also any comments. And the comments are great because they tell us, what are we missing? What are the blind spots? What are the bits that you want to know more about? What are the bits that actually we over talked? And it helps us shape what those sessions are. What it's not is an opportunity for raw sewage. Now, there's a variety of different comments throughout those live broadcasts. And genuinely, I find this one quite funny because I don't care. But others do. And to others, that actually puts them off sharing their knowledge. It puts them off helping others. It puts them off being online and trying to make people or help people to learn and grow. And you've already lost some people. I'm not going to go into who that is, but there are people who are no longer on your screens because they can't, and in their words, put up with the bullshit. So I'm going to change that phrase to, it's not be kind. In a world where you can be anything, just don't be a dick. General rule. I try not to be. I'm hoping others will. Interestingly and stupidly, everyone's name is logged. But we will deal with that differently. Anyway, all feedback is welcome, mostly. Let's get into Capture One. Yeah, let's talk about fun stuff, because that's just stupid. So, new toys, 16.7.2. Big one, export masks as alpha layers into PSD. We'll talk about that in a second, because that's actually very powerful if you're especially going into pixel editors. PSD, remember, is Adobe's proprietary Photoshop document. You've also got PSB, which is Photoshop Big. So if you're dealing with images that are more than 2 gig, it goes into a PSB rather than a PSD. It's the same thing. Critically and crucially, don't worry about things like Affinity, when I talk about that being free. Wonderful. Because Affinity is completely compatible with PSD and PSB files. So you can use Affinity to edit your PSD and PSD file or PSB files, which means the export function in 16.7.2 is as applicable to Photoshop as it is to Affinity if you're going to edit the pixels. Mask thumbnails are in the layers and mask tool. We'll talk about that in a second. Combining masks have been improved. You can now do a magic brush in a submask. We'll talk about that in a second. Big one, you can rename submasks, which is quite exciting because I know a lot of us were getting confused with the latest release when you started putting in all these different, linear versus luminant or luminosity range and whatever. You forgot exactly what that was about. So you can now double click on the submask and rename it, which is a great move. improved layout is about the Capture One Live. So Capture One Live has now got star ratings and color tag retention fixes. There's some improvements in terms of Snapdragon ARM chips if you're running Windows on an ARM system. There's some performance improvements. Lots of new camera supports, lots of new lens support, the normal stuff, and generally bug fixes. So that's nice, isn't it? Right? It's a nice upgrade. And if you took in 16.7, if you remember when we launched or when we talked about it in beta 3, I think it was, we talked about the fact that you were able to now split masks and combine them and intersect them, just like you could do with luminosity, but now you could do it with multiple different types of masks. You've now got within 0.2 of a version update a load of extra stuff. So exporting masks into pixel editors, the thumbnails coming up, the fact that you can rename them, the fact that you can combine them with Magic Brush, blah blah blah. So you can see the direction of travel. 16.7's got a long way to go. A lot more new cool stuff to be added. Paul, is it easy? And let's get rid of the lots and lots of text because that's going to be. Let's just put a blank screen up for now. Is it easy enough round tripping between Capture One and Affinity? Yes, it is. Same deal with Capture One and Affinity as it is with Capture One and Photoshop. It will put, if you're in a catalog, it will put the file into your catalog browser. If you're on a session, it will also put it into the session folder and you can pull it up. Okay, so with all that in mind, which is quite cool, let's go into Capture One and just cover some stuff. So those of you that were on the beta release, you will remember this image because we did some stuff with layers, which is quite nice, right up there. We can, let me just, I want to change this to be a medium size so I can see more of my layers. Sorry, I got a little bit lost there. So I've got these two layers, adjustment layer one. So these you could always rename and you should really be renaming them. So let's call it Sunset Glow. And then this one is called Saturation because I believe from memory, yeah, it added a saturation in the sky. And that's a linear gradient with an AI select. So in other words, a gradient here, but taking away a subtraction of my city and a radial gradient underneath. So lots and lots of good stuff in there. I could rename these, but just to show the masking thing, let's just do this now. So I've got here my image with my two layers, two masks. Those masks are combination masks, remember. But all Capture One actually cares about and all that your pixel editor cares about is the combined combination. It's not going to export all of these individually. If you want to rename them, just to be clear, you just double click linear to horizon, and that is a gradient. So there's my sublayers masked, and I can actually make a point. So I've got my little icon here that tells me this is a subtract, great, but I can say, have my own words in there, say remove from that, whatever. So let's go into export, right click, and I can either export it as a file, and I can go to export here and choose, or I can go to edit with. If I have Affinity in here, that's the old version 2 in there. If I have Affinity in there, then it'll go into Affinity and I can round trip from there to Paul's question. But I don't, I'm going to do it into Photoshop. If you have it as default to a TIFF, which I do, and this is one thing, there's a little gotcha. You don't get the option down here to export the layers. But if I go to PSD or PSB, let's call it a 16-bit PSD in Adobe RGB, I have the option to do masks as alpha channels. So don't miss that option and go, ooh, I haven't updated or I'm missing it or there's something wrong. If it'll only appear if you're on PSD or PSB. Let's go to edit the variants. So click that button. It's just going to quickly export. This is a 150 meg file or megapixel file, so it'll take it a couple seconds. There we go. Where are my layers? I know my head is sort of in the way. So in here, this is a solid layer. It's a flat file. There's no, if I turn this off and on, nothing happens because there's nothing else there. What I have though is channels. And I have alpha channels, one for my saturation layer and one for my sunset glow layer. And I can do everything that I would normally be able to do with an alpha layer in Photoshop or in Affinity, that I could if I'd drawn it in there. So this is so powerful for things like luminosity masks. You know, there's all these plugins and tools for Photoshop where it will create you luma ranges and stuff like that. You can now do it straight after or straight out of Capture One and bring it in as a channel, as an alpha channel that you can play with. So you've got full editability of your outputted layers, of your outputted masks within your pixel editor now. And it does save them, which is quite nice, right? So let's go back into Capture One. So if I were to save this, for example, with a PSD, let's go back into Capture One, close my activity window. We should find, there is my PSD. It's been added in automatically. Now notice, because I've saved it as a PSD, it's been flattened. So bear that in mind. In Photoshop, this is still not flat because it's a PSD. So I've still got all my channels in here. But what Capture One sees is this layer here. So it sees a flattened image. It doesn't see those channels coming back. So just bear that in mind. There's a little quirk in there if you think mentally about it. But what it means is I now have the ability to do very complex masks in here. Really complex masks in Capture One. Luma ranges, I can combine it with a magic brush now in Capture One. I can go into my pixel editor, pull up those masks and still edit as if I were in layered, non-destructive Capture One, but now in my pixel editor. So if I did screw up and I made the city a bit too dark, but I've already made changes in the pixel version, in the PSD, oh, it's a nightmare, right? I'd have to go back into Capture One, make those changes, re-export it and try and recreate the differences in pixel. Now, in a sort of way, I can now do it in the pixel editor. I'd still prefer to get it right in Capture One, but I have the ability to here. Where are we? Prasad, I'd like to see similar between releases with few new and update to existing features. I think you're going to see, genuinely, I think, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, you're going to see updates that are much bigger increments, let's call it that. You can see the direction of travel. They are, the foot's on the gas. They're doing this stuff as quickly as they can. Not only did 16.7.2 bring with it new desktop features, it also brought new mobile features. So the mobile app's obviously bringing along as well. Don't miss out on some of this stuff. It's cool. Philippe, I'm waiting for a new denoiser AI and animals mask AI for the next major update. I'm waiting for a city AI. It's funny. So subject and background, it's always been this thing for me. These two functions here. Oh, you can't see my mouse. That's weird. These two functions here. There we go. Subject and background. I get frustrated about because even in this case here, so let's create a completely new variant. Subject. Like, it's obvious, right? Ugh. I mean, actually, that's better than I was expecting it to do. Normally, it just covers the whole image. Let's try a background mask. See, I don't understand why it thinks that's not a subject. But it doesn't really matter if we go into some of these images. So let's go into this one. Let's try a subject mask here. It would be good if it could be a bit better for non-human masks. I agree. But in the meantime, as you'll have seen last week when we did the Dubai run-throughs, the tools that you have for landscape are pretty up there anyway. Like the fact that the AI brush is mostly on point. The fact that you can do magic brush still. Don't forget, you've still got these old tools, these good tools that were there before. You've still got the traditional brush. You've still got magic brush. You've still got AI brush. It's just these were made easier for people. And yes, it would be good if it did expand into wildlife and non-wildlife things. Prasad, have you come across any situation where you want to see just a sublayer mask alone to edit, since always a computed mask is loaded into the viewer? I'm either missing some words in that question or I'm getting really confused, Prasad. So have you come across any situation where you want to see just the sublayer mask alone to edit, since it's always computed? Do you mean, well, you can see just the sublayer mask? I think I see what you mean. Right. So I think, let me just give you an example. If on this saturation mask here, so this growth here coming out of the horizon, if I were to add a brush mask. Let's create that mask. I think, Prasad, maybe I'm wrong, but why am I not getting? There we go. It's not possible for me to see just this layer as a mask. So I'm always going to see the overall impact of the mask on the entire layer. So I'm seeing this saturation layers mask, which is a combination of an additive brush mask with a linear gradient mask subtracted with an AI, so a radial mask, sorry, subtracting an AI, subtracting a linear gradient, and adding a brush. That's what we're actually seeing. But it's not necessarily possible to see the individual. If I just wanted to see that brush on its own, I don't think at the moment I can. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. I would say as a feature request if you want it, because yeah, you are unable to see the individual components. It will always roll it up into the overall layer. Yeah. John, I'm having slow redraw mask performance on a 6K XDR. So if you're on a Mac, so M3 Ultra with GFX files. GFX files are not big. They're not 16-bit. They're not 150 odd. This here is a 16-bit 150 meg file, and it's on a M1 or 2 Ultra. I think I can't remember which one. But no, I'm not seeing any redraw issue. And actually, I'm on a 6K XDR on this screen. The other one's a studio display. I'm not seeing any redraw issues. I would try a reinstall if necessary. B, check for any updates on your graphics driver. C, I'm not saying this is the fix, but it's worthwhile trying to turn off some of this stuff if you want to check. So you can turn on your image processing. Funnily enough, I had it set to never on there. Don't know why. It was probably testing something. But if it is causing you a problem, change that from auto to never. See if the problem goes away. If it does, then it's something about the hardware acceleration, but you're on a very similar system to me. It shouldn't cause you an issue. Paula, how long till AI masking will make Magic Brush obsolete? I hope never, because they do different things. Magic Brush is looking for similar pixels. AI masking is looking for something that seems like it's the same object or the same subject. That's not necessarily the same as similar pixels, and I use them both quite extensively for different things. So I hope that they keep them both because they do very different jobs. And actually, I want more options in Capture One, not less. But yeah. So let's get into your pictures, having done some of that stuff. So you've seen a round trip in Photoshop. The same, Paul, you asked the question, the same will happen with Affinity. But remember, even if you are going to Affinity, sorry, let me just make one little point. Edit with, let's say I'm going to Affinity. I still need to tell it as a PSD if I want to transition the masks across as alpha channels. If I don't, and I send it across to Affinity as a TIFF, as a JPEG or whatever, I'm not going to have this function down here to tick to say masks, and it's not going to bring the masks across to my pixel editor. So that's not about Affinity. That's about it's just not a PSD file or a PSB file, so it doesn't know how to do it. Cool. Let's go into Christian's shot. There we go. Refreshing, right? It's not a city. It's not a light. Not lights. So first off, whenever you guys send something in, I'm going to look at what you tell me, what you ask, and also what was there before. 2 shots were sent in here. It's interesting. The one that is starred with a 4-star is this one. And I'm going to be really honest, Christian. It's the one I probably like the least. So again, this is all personal choice. So it's nothing to do with what's right, what's wrong. This is my view on this, and your view may be different. So please please take everything with a pinch of salt. But there's something about, for me, the width of this shot. And in a 4:3, which is this aspect ratio, my gut feel is that we're missing some of it. It's just gone. It's gone too far. The cropping on the sides has gone a little bit too far, in my opinion. So I'm actually in a place of keeping with this aspect ratio, personally, which I think is probably 3:2. And then I look at what you did in this edit here. And I'm looking at this edit here. So this edit's got lots of lovely stuff going on. but this one just feels a bit more complete. It feels a bit too dark, and we'll talk about that in a second. But these masks are good. You know, the toning is nice. If I do a before and after, that was what was there before. That's pretty tricky. You know, it's not quite nuclear, but nuclear grass is on the way. But you know, it's quite flat actually in the before. You know, you've got quite a stable histogram. It's quite a decent spread. It's not like a spike in the middle flat, but it does feel very, even though it's almost fluorescent in terms of its color, it doesn't feel very detailed and particularly textured. Whereas this here really does. So I think this is a good edit. As one person who knows this, unfortunately, from last week, and if you watch the Dubai stream, you'll see on stream 1, I made a fatal error. I'm going to give you a hint in that by doing this in a second. Interestingly, when you do an upgrade to Capture One, in this case 16.7.2, remember your workspace will reset. You can always go to Window, Workspace, and you can choose one of the millions that I have in here, but it will always back up your previous one. But more importantly, you can add in new tools. The bit that annoys me is my dust removal doesn't sit in my lens tab by default, so I would always add that in there. Also, I always want my color, and I always want my metadata tabs. But anyway, we'll come back to that in a second. So I could remove dust, but before I remove it, I want to have a look at it. So let's create a new layer, a new filled adjustment layer, and we'll call it Dust Spot Finder. And here's one I made earlier. I have a curve that I saved in here, and it is called Dust Spot Rainbow Finder. There's also another one that I made called Rainbow Splat, depending on which way I want to find my dust spots. All it is, so before anyone makes it into a dark art, it's really not. You take your curve and you make it into extreme contrast between very small changes in level. So between 0 and 20, I'm stretching the contrast to be massive, and the same then by the time it gets down to 45, the same again by the time it gets to 62. What it means is I get this weird, horrible, don't get me wrong, rainbow effect, but what it does is it shows up my dust spots. And in here, unfortunately, Christian, there are quite a lot of them, right? So if I look, let's just get rid of this layer. It's just to prove a point. Let's look up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You might not be able to see all of these on YouTube, but 14. I think that's it. This sort of murks it out a little bit. It's a bit too murky. There's more here. 1 there, 2, 3. Yeah, loads of them around here. So let's try and use Capture One's dust spot removal. Remove dust. It did a good job on mine last week. Actually, it's pretty good. It's done some of that well. But it's one where you do want to make sure, as one little final check in any picture you're producing, just make sure you haven't forgotten or missed any dust spots that were in there, because there are a load in there. And I'd be really, really careful, because especially when you print, it's interesting. You don't see it as easily on a screen, but when you go to print an image, those dust spots stand out like a sore thumb. So the bit that I'm not a fan of in here, so if I look at here compared to here, this one wins for me, but it's too heavy on the fall off top and bottom. And I just want to see which one it is. So that's a radial that's sort of doubled down. In fact, what's going on is we've got a load of radial masks which all compound on top of each other. And I get why. So this is a good example of using lots of masks to compound something. But in here, let me just show you the masks themselves. So let's go into here. This is the first radial. And that has on it a reduction in brightness. No problem there. And it only affects the white areas, fades off into the black areas. Right. Let's have a look at this one. Radial 2. It's added another layer of darkening, because it's more brightness stuff, but to a different shape, slightly different shape. Radial 3, more darkening, but again, a broader shape. Radial 4, more darkening, but again, a broader shape. Now, I would argue you could possibly have done this with one radial for all of those. This one up here doesn't feel like it needs to be a radial. It's almost like it needs to be a linear. And this one here is over the top again. I don't think you necessarily need that in 6 different radials. I think, and let's just do it to prove the point. What I'm going to do, by the way, is right click and clone this variant so that my changes, I'm going to flag it in red by pressing the minus key on the keyboard. So that's got my little red dot. That means that I know this is the one I'm editing, not the one that Christian sent in with his edits. I've just seen a comment there because Mr. Grover's heckling, which is good. So David saying, I think that Capture One needs to have an extensive tutorial on new masking, not only how but why. Your prayers have been answered, David 1 by David 2, because there is a blog post on its way, which will explain all of that stuff, what each one is used for, how they can be combined, what the effect of combining them is, all of that stuff in one go. Christian, I didn't realize the dust. No one does until they print it, mate. Then it hurts. Paul, if I'm using the splat reset, let's call it that, you got no faith in dust remove tool. No, it's not a case of no faith. What it is actually very simple. I have seen cases where certain things that I know are dust don't look like dust, and the dust removal tool doesn't always pick it up. So I would always have it as a separate, as a double check. And in fact, to give you a sense of how serious I am about it, let's go into Photoshop here. And in my Photoshop, I also have, if I were to create a new curve, so a new layer with curves, in my curve presets, I have a dust spot finder. And actually, in here we can see 1, 2. Now, here's the thing. If I took that off, you can't see them, right? There they are. Now they're not. That's how sensitive it can be. And there's one there that you wouldn't see. There's another one there. So let's take this one here. Let's really zoom in. So that's a pretty obvious dust spot with my weird curve up here. Turn this off, you can hardly see it, but you will when you print. And that's the thing. So just bear in mind, some of this is not about screen, it's about print, different sizes, you see more or less. But as a guide, it's not a case of not trusting the tool. It's just a case of I trust my eyes more than any other tool, regardless of who made it. So yeah, hopefully that's, yeah. Have some confidence in the tool, absolutely, but check it. It's a bit like things in your car, right? You just want to check it every now and then, even if the thing says it's fine. Right. In here then, so we've got a load of radials. I don't think we need them. So I'm going to delete. Let me go back to there. The reason I don't think we need them is because what those radials were doing is effectively giving a fall off that got darker at the top, lighter in the bottom third, and then darker again at the bottom. So I'm just going to change this, instead of being quite so harsh, to be a softer fall off. And all that's doing, if I go to the grayscale, by moving this, that transition line, you see this is obvious, right? I can see that transition line. And I think what Christian may have been doing was trying to soften that transition going up. We don't need to do it through multiple radials. We can just do it like this and just grab that inner line, and we soften the amount that those radials are changed between fully transparent through to fully opaque, which is black through to white. The distance makes it softer. So the closer that distance is, the harder the transition line, the more obvious it will be. If I turn this off, you will see, and in fact, let me just put that brightness all the way down. We can see the transition. By making it softer, we cannot see the transition. It's there. It's obviously brighter here than darker there. But we don't need all of those different masks to do that. And what I'm going to do is just make this really wide, really quite tall, and move this into here. So I'm having full effect at the top, little effect at the bottom, and not a lot in the middle. And what that allows me to do then is to be more aggressive if I want with the brightness. But bear another thing in mind. Brightness has an effect of flattening the contrast in an image. The reason being, it's not shifting the values, it's squeezing them towards the dark or towards the light area. So instead of using brightness in this case, I'm actually going to use exposure, because I want to keep that contrast. I want this top to still be pretty, pretty gritty, pretty heavy as a sky. But I go from there to there. This sort of feels a bit more natural as a vignette than this one that feels quite artificial. It feels like this has been added in post. It feels like that's been darkened overly. So I'd be in that place. If you want to really punch the sky a little bit more, you could add in a bit of contrast, which will give you an effect of darkening as well, because anything that's left of 128 is going to get darker, anything right of 128 is going to get lighter. And if you're worried about the sky, I mean, I know you've got a deep sky layer in here, which is getting you some texture, but if you really want that sky at the top to be pretty dark, you're just going to add in, again, very soft, but a gradient up there, and again, just pull in that exposure, and if I need to, maybe a bit of saturation. You have, Christian, a big dot there, which is possibly a sensor spot. Which isn't a particularly nice one to clean. But while it's difficult to see, it's there. So again, another reason to have different curves to be able to basically see what's going on. But that's where I do, and all we've done is we've reduced complication. Beforehand, you had all these different radial masks that were all adding a compound of a brightness reduction. We've just got to there, and this just feels a little more soft, a little more natural, less crispy in terms of contrast. If you want it to look that crispy in contrast, use the top layer. So I'm going to call this one Top Sky, and this one Overall Vignette, because that's what we're building. But it's a vignette that is shifted down, not the normal vignette from Capture One. I can pull in that exposure a little bit more. Top Sky, I could pull in a bit more again. You know, we can get it back to there pretty much, but that soft transition is more pleasing when you print it, especially, or if you're looking at it on a big screen, than those really quite harsh lines as you go in. The grass color in here, while I get some of this. If I look at the before, it's gone very much from very lush green to a mix of greens and yellows. My gut feel, and I think that's what this means, color de l'herbes. That's the best French accent I'm ever going to do. So what that's doing is it's lightening it up and it's adding some contrast, fine. But also I'm going to guess if I go into either advanced, all these greens, there's a hue shift in here. And it's gone to be a little more yellow rather than a little more green. We don't want it obviously that green. But where I would be at with this is actually those yellows, it's fine to bring them in, but I'd maybe desaturate them and also darken them just to keep that lushness of the grass. So same with this one, you've already done some lightness work on there, but I'd go the other way, darken and desaturate. And then again, there's a compound effect on here because you've got a lot of hue shifting on the same color again and again. But I would be sort of there, and in fact, maybe on the greens, just saturate them a little bit more. So we go from there, which feels very, what's the word? Scraggy, I guess. Versus here, which just feels a bit more complete, a bit more natural. And if I go back to my original, while this is a departure from that, it's certainly a different color tone. My gut feel is that this bottom one is a closer rendition in terms of the continuity of those different hues and tones than the original edit there. No such thing as a silly question, Rick. Where will the blog post that David mentioned be? It will likely be on capture1.com. There is a blog section in there with lots of different articles. I think from memory it's in the support site, but I may be wrong there. We can point you to it when it's published. Don't worry. You won't miss it. Other than that, in here, let's just talk about this use of Deep Sky. So Deep Sky is one of the style brushes. It's found in here as long as you have a current version of Capture One from the last, I don't know, 4 years, 3 years, 4 years. You will find it in here. And Deep Sky is a collection of edits that you can apply as a brush. If you don't want to apply it as a brush and you want to apply it as a gradient or anything else, basically, you can do it one of two ways. Number one, let's go back actually to our original here, or a version of the original. In fact, let's go full raw, new variant. Right. So if I start painting Deep Sky, I get some of the contrast that's in there. It basically does some contrast work. It shifts the blues, shifts the whites as well, makes them a bit punchier. But the problem is I'm not going to draw this mask, right? But I now have a layer of deep sky. So all I have to do now is clear that mask and then choose how I want to select the sky. And that could be using an AI brush, like so. And that's done a pretty good job, right? Yeah. If not, I could use Magic Brush, or there's another new way, if you think about it. This is overcomplicating it, but think about the new logic. New layer. Sorry, what am I talking about? Let's fill this layer. So in other words, in fact, let's just go remove that. Let me go back to my style brush. I'm going to go to Deep Sky, and there. I can fill that entire mask. That's applied it to the whole image. And then I can combine it. And I can say subtract with, let's say it was difficult. Let's say I wanted to do the ground and not the sky. Well, I can go AI select, create that mask, and now take away the sky from my deep sky layer. So I now have a deep sky brush that only applies to what's not the sky. So this ability to combine masks is quite nice, right? Because it gives us different options. Before, we'd almost have to do the fill mask and then erase. The problem with erase is it's quite, well, it's rasterized, it's quite set. There's not much we can do once it is gone. Whereas now we can start to go back and edit things and add in new variations. So in terms of where I'd get to with this shot, I think I would be sort of here. As a look, obviously the original, let's just reset that one to the original. I think this has got a lot more detail in it, but I'm not so sure you needed all of the crispness and contrast and clarity that was in there. I'd tone it back a little bit, and I don't think that really strong vignette like this just doesn't feel very natural, nor here, but it does there a little bit. And I think layering a radial on top of a radial on top of a radial and all of them doing a brightness reduction is just getting you're almost creating bands in there, which is something we try and avoid. So I would have if you can, try and do it with one radial mask, a lot simpler. Right, let's have a look at Georg's shot. Now, most of you are going to be able to guess what I'm likely to say on Georg's shot, which is contrast and HDR. Why am I going to say that? Because this image has been flattened. So here is a high contrast image. Not debating this is a challenging shot because of that dynamic range between the sky and what is effectively backlit shadow. But if I create a new version of that, this is my contrast histogram. I've got a peak here that's actually underexposed and a peak here that's almost underexposed, right? But not too much. So I'm okay with that. Here's our output. We've lost all the contrast. Let me just put that preview back up. We've gone from a shot that had a big difference between the brights and the darks, and we've lumped it all in together. And the way that that's happened is a bit of a mix. So it's by pulling down highlights, pulling down white in the sky. In the not sky, pulling up exposure. So basically we're pushing all of the content of that histogram to be away from being contrast and being one big lump of just color and tone in the middle. And I think you lose something in doing that. I would genuinely just start this one a little bit differently. Let's go into our levels tool because it's a simpler version of curve. And I'm just going to brighten that up like that. This isn't, note, overexposed. I have no exposure or exposure warning up here. If I go too far, yes. But look at that latitude there. And actually, I would argue you probably had about 3 stops more. In fact, we can actually calculate. You could have pushed this by, I called it, about 3 stops. Just over 3 stops. Without actually overexposing something. Now, I'm not a fan, as you know, of exposing to the right. I think it's dangerous if you push it too far. But you could have pushed this one a lot further. So I think that it's a bit of a mix here, right? Because I'm actually, by doing that exposure, I'm actually lifting some of the shadows out of being shadows, which is nice. So let's lift it up by 1 stop, and then let's stretch the histogram by another load. I can afford to pull down a little bit of highlight detail, but it's only to get details and a little bit of shadow. Be really careful using black and white because it has that effect of making it look cartoony. We don't like cartoony. Those of you that have been on it for 5 years know the cartoony word is not good, and we're bringing it out now. You notice I'm not even on a new layer at this point. I'm still on the image layer. I'm just going to switch that warmth a little bit up to there. We're going to go and grab our green with the advanced color editor, make it really smooth, pull up a bit of saturation, pull down some lightness. Otherwise, we don't want nuclear grass. What I could do is create a new layer with, hopefully, I was hoping for all of that, but it's not going to play ball, is it? So I don't want all of that in the bottom. So always turn your mask on when you're drawing with an AI brush so you can see what it's adding or not. Into there. Nope, it's adding too much. If it does add too much, undo and then try using a marquee selection. A lot more accurate generally using a marquee. If it's got bits that are missing in the middle, well, that's okay. We're just going to use a normal brush. And this is the thing. Think about it. Go back to just your normal brush. It's still there. It's not gone away. I'm being really rough here. Some of you will know why in a minute. But these don't really matter because I'm going to refine it to its maximum. And that's going to give me a really detailed view of this. I want to use my magic eraser now. Fun. And just erase some of this sky and some of this lake. Herb, this image is on auto, so film standard, it's not linear response. We could pull it into linear response as a curve, but let's just do that very quickly. It doesn't change the source data, remember. So under my base characteristics, oops, move that out. Change this to linear response and we get a flatter image to start with. My data is still the same. My inbound data is still the same. Anything that I can recover in linear response, in theory, I can cover or I can recover from film standard. It just might need some more work. It's just going to be more contrasty to start with. But I don't think contrast is the problem in this shot. I think the lack of contrast is the problem with this edit. So now I have my layer up here. I'm going to use a little bit of clarity. Just expand that. Just to make them pop a little bit. I'm going to lift them with exposure, not with a HDR tool. Lift them up with exposure, just to brighten them. And then with our sky and our reflection, well, what I need effectively is a new layer, copy mask from this one, which I named clearly, really easily. Let's go with rocks and green. This is sky and reflection, but it's not yet. It will be when I right click and say invert the masks. That's anything that wasn't a rock or the green. I can change this now to be a little bit, I'm going to cheat a little bit, push a little bit of blue in there, push a bit of saturation in there. It's a bit too pink actually. Let's go there. I could actually use the dehaze tool on the sky just to pull out some of this detail in here. If we go to before and after, you know, we're really making it pop. Now that may be too much, so if it is, we go to our opacity of our overall layer, pull it back. Remember as well, I've got my overall image layer, which has got a load of changes in. If I don't want it on an image layer anymore, right click, move image layer adjustments to a new layer. This one we'll call global changes, and they apply to everything because it's an everything mask. If I wanted to combine it with something else, I could. But my sky and reflection, that's looking pretty good. I could pull down a little bit of exposure. Now, whether or not this works as a frame, that's for everyone's own personal taste. In fact, let's just pull in a little bit of a crop to match what you've done. So somewhere maybe around there. Oh, and he pulled in away from that jetty there. So, you know, this is entirely down to you. But from there to there, this one looks like it's on planet Earth. This one looks like it's on the illustrator's dashboard. And the reason is because it's lost all of the contrast. It's nothing to do with the composition. It's nothing to do with the camera's capability. It's purely about trying to recover too much. And if you try and recover too much, You go from having that wonderful little histogram here. In fact, let's look at our histogram here. This is beautiful. I've got a nice little peak up here in our highlights. It's not too blown, it's not too risky. Nice little clump of stuff down here in the dark shadows, and everything in between. Here we've fixed everything in quotes, but it's all smashed together in a mid-tone here, which is why it gives it that effect of looking a little bit sort of muddy, a little bit flat. If you've got contrast in a shot, use it, and your camera is capable of capturing it. Where are we? East Bay J. I'm still on Capture 123. Will I be lost here if I don't have the latest version? No. But combining masks, which we haven't done too much of, so just bear that in mind. But combining masks, you won't have. There's a couple of other little features, but generally speaking, no. But I would encourage you to maybe look at updating. Right. Let's just do a very quick one if we can, because we've got 5 minutes still. Ian, a quick question and answer. So this is a handheld shot. It's taken on a phase 1, I believe. Yeah. So handheld with a medium format camera at 80mm on a 25th of a second ISO 50. That's the problem here, not the edit. They're blurry. It's not going to, this is your JPEG output. It's not going to do anything. So this is your edit here to here. I can't fix this. I don't think anything can. You could use something like Topaz Sharpen to try and get the detail out, but it's just going to be inventing stuff that wasn't really there. Generally speaking, in this case here, this ISO 50 is a problem. That's, if you need to be at f6.3, need to be at 80mm, fine. I will want to see that shutter speed up to about 120 or 125th at minimum, probably 160th, maybe even more. I think sadly, you've hit the limit here. So if you're happy with that edit, stick with it. There's nothing, in terms of the edit itself, little tweaks in there, that looks pretty nice. And it's painful when we miss it. But yeah, it's difficult to say reshoot it, but it is one way you reshoot. Your phase 1 will do ISO 200 pretty clean. That would have bumped you up here to 100th of a second, which would have helped. Another little change, maybe in aperture, would have helped a little bit too. But this is just about getting your shutter speed faster. That's all. When are we likely to get overhead wire and fence detection removal? Well, that'll be a question for Capture 1. Is it in their roadmap? I don't know. I suspect it possibly is, along with a load of other things that would be nice to do. But whether it will come, what I would imagine, if I were playing a game, somewhere in retouch as a function, not the retouch face thing, but retouch as a function, you are likely to, that's where those sort of tools come in, because it's using the same logic of using AI to find something and then either remove it or change it. But when, I'm not entirely sure. Yes, right. So, do we have time to do Alf's? Alf had a question, actually, so it'll be really simple on this one. Alf said, I like my edit. Is there anything else I would change? I like your edit too, Alf. I think it's a little bit too orangey warm, but that's, maybe A, I wasn't there. B, I may be wrong. But I'd be in a place of, if it were me personally, I'd do two things. I want more of a vignette, so I want to see it. I want to feel like I'm peering into something to see this. Number two, I'd back this away a little bit, and I'd do it through a little bit of saturation drop off. I might do a touch of, if I go to my color balance, go to my shadows, and cool the shadows down like that. That gives the effect of slightly less orange in the shot. And then I'd go into my vignette, and I would pull that into like there. So I'd go from there, nothing wrong with it, quite like it, to there. This just gives me a bit more tone. If I'm worried about the shadows losing detail, pull this up a tiny, tiny bit, just a shadow slider. And that's it. So anything wrong with the top one? No. I personally like the cooler shadows. I might actually take those blues as a result of making those shadows more blue. Let's go into there and actually desaturate them. So not only is it going cooler, but it's also going less saturated in those cool blues, which are also sat in the shadows. But other than that, no, it's a nice edit. Whether you go with that one, which probably feels more realistic, natural, earthy, or this one, up to you. But what you've done on here, it works. And if I look at before and after, it's relatively untouched. The big thing with nature, right? We don't want to touch it too much, but a little bit of healing in there, a little bit of dodging and burning. Done a good job. So for today, that's where we're at. That one there, Ian, unfortunately, yeah, you've hit the limit of handheld shooting, unfortunately. 25th of a second, even if I was on a 23mm lens, I wouldn't risk it. Handheld, you'd be lucky to keep it steady less than about an 80th in general. So just keep that shutter speed up and do it with your ISO or do it with your aperture. But yeah, this one's going to hit the limit of what you can do. Georg, try and avoid losing contrast. Your initial shot had all this wonderful stuff in here with this big lump of brights and big lump of dark. Use levels, use exposure, expand that out, but don't lose the contrast by trying to recover everything. Instead, use the contrast. Make it about something that's bright and contrasty, and then to your heart's content in terms of cropping and changing stuff. Christian, as I say, all of these, I like all of these edits. Maybe next week we'll come back onto this one with the trees. But for me personally, I wouldn't go that far. It just feels a little bit too illustrative. I'd go into there. And then for those of you that want to play, don't forget, literally, just for the sake of it, play. Right click, edit with, go into whether it is Photoshop, whether it's Affinity, it doesn't matter. Choose PSD, and now you can do your masks and alpha channels. Those masks, of course, being full of sub-masks that you can now rename, and thumbnails in Capture One. Isn't that sexy? As sexy as software goes. Anyway, well done, everyone. Well done, especially to Carlo and the runners-up, but Carlo gets his little growthy. Well done. Do download Affinity while you can, because it's free, so why wouldn't you? Remember, if you are on a subscription, do please update to the new toys. Why wouldn't you? Again, if you're not on subscription, life's about choices. You make yours. If your choice is to stay a couple of versions behind because these tools don't help you, then go for it. No one's going to force you to. But equally, you might be missing a couple of things. Don't forget to upload your files there, paulreeferlive.wetransfer.com. They will come in ready for next week. We'll put next week's up on the website, on the YouTube channel, and in the Facebook group. That Facebook group is where we do all the competition stuff. Of course, it's quite a marathon, isn't it? In between now and then, there's the latest masterclass. So if you liked the stuff that we did in Dubai about architecture and city stuff, you might like that masterclass. You'll find the link down below. You'll find also all the other masterclasses that we've done over the last couple of years in there. But for today, that's it. See you next week, people. Enjoy your weekends. Take care. Goodbye.